Hi, I'm Amy Hirschfeld, Executive Director of the Idaho Human Rights Education Center, proud builder of the Idaho Anne Frank Human Rights Memorial. Today, we'd like to share a story of another young woman with you. Rose Beal volunteers as a docent at the memorial, giving tours to thousands of school children here each year. Rose is a Holocaust survivor whose story is testimony to the strength and endurance of the human spirit.
If you can, try to think of me as somebody your own age, because I was your age when all the events I'm going to speak about happened to me. I was just 11 years old when Hitler came into power, and while it didn't mean anything to me, I remember the day because my grandmother, who lived with us, was crying all day long. She knew all about Hitler, she knew he hated the Jews, and she was terribly worried about her children and her grandchildren. And I remember my mother trying to calm her down, and she said, "Look, this is all going to blow over. The German people are too smart to be listening to this ignorant Austrian." But my grandmother just kept on crying, and 6 weeks later, she died very suddenly. She was spared the knowledge that indeed 4 of her children, their spouses, 6 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild were all murdered during the Holocaust. Things changed very rapidly for us. The streets weren't safe anymore. Our teachers, our parents told us not to hang out in the streets or the playgrounds. We were often ambushed by other children, the very kids we played with just a few months earlier. They collected all the books by Jewish authors, and in my city, the city of Frankfurt, they put it all in front of City Hall and started a big bonfire. What frightened me the most were these long rows of stormtroopers who were marching down the street, and their boots made an awful lot of racket on the cobblestone, and they were singing. And I still remember the melody and the lyrics of some of the song. One of them went, "When Jewish blood is spurting from our knives, things are going well." And with all of this happening, the adults still thought Hitler would disappear magically. We just didn't want to leave Germany. This was our home. And that all changed about 2.5 years after he came into power, when new laws came into effect in Germany. And these laws stripped us of all civil rights and all human rights. No Jew could hold a government position. Judges and lawyers were not allowed in the courtrooms. Jewish doctors could only treat Jewish patients. All professors and teachers from the university and the public school system were dismissed, and all Jewish children were expelled from public schools. Signs went up in a lot of the stores, in cafes, in theaters, saying Jews not allowed or Jews not wanted here. And in the playgrounds, the parks, and the municipal pools, which we always used, the signs read, "Jews and dogs not allowed." And it was just about at that time when my mother, who was a single mother, had 2 younger brothers, decided if we want to live, we need to get out. And she wrote to our relatives in America, and they were gracious enough to send us the papers. And then we got a call from the American consulate that the papers were in order, but we had to wait at least 3.5 years before they would issue us a visa. There was a strict quota, immigration quota in America, and we were just at the bottom of the list. and there was nothing we could do about it. We just hoped that nothing worse would happen to us. But that was not to be. In the middle of the night, there was a loud banging at our door, and in came 3 men, 2 policemen and 1 Gestapo agent. They told us to get dressed and come with them. When we got down on the street, we realized that we were not the only ones. There were people coming from all directions, each with those 3 men guarding them. And they walked us through the streets of Frankfurt to a gathering spot, and big trucks were waiting for us, and we were loaded onto those trucks and driven to the main railroad station in Frankfurt. By that time, we knew that we were being deported to Poland. We were on that train for a night and the better part of 2 days. At the border, the policemen didn't even get off the train, and we were turned over to the stormtroopers. And they were terrible. They received us with drawn revolvers shooting into the air. They had these rubber nightsticks. They beat whoever they could beat up, particularly the older people who didn't get off the train quickly enough. They just beat them on the legs. By the time we got into the tunnel was already half full. And as more and more people came in, it became tighter and tighter. There were people fainting, and a couple of women near us died. They could not fall down because we were so tight. There was a group of men praying, and they were told not to pray. They continued, and they were viciously beaten. And I just couldn't wait to get out there. I really didn't care what would happen to me, but I needed to get out of this tunnel. And just as we were at the end, the next people to go through, a voice came out and it says, "Due to the kindness of our Führer, Adolf Hitler, you can now all go home." Many, many years later, I read the statistics of this transport. There were 17,000 of us deported. 6,000 made it across the border to Poland before they closed the border, and they were all put in a ghetto and later sent to Auschwitz. 9,000 were trapped in a piece of land called the No Man's Land. Those 9,000 all perished. 2,000 were allowed, and we were among those, were allowed to go back. Only about 200 left Germany, could leave Germany before World War II started. So out of 17,000, there were about 200 survivors. And we were part of that surviving 200. We were home just a few days when we were awakened in the morning, and it was quite startling. We looked out of the window, and there were small groups of men, civilians, not uniformed men, and they had long iron bars and sticks, and they just smashed all of the windows. It was the beginning of the horrific Crystal Night. They went into houses, they threw furniture out on the street. If anybody went out, they got beaten up. We looked down, and there was a woman who lived an elderly woman on the first floor, and she was severely beaten while they held her son. She subsequently died. And then the trucks came, and the trucks were coming all night long. And by next morning, every man between the ages of 16 and 60 throughout Germany had been arrested and sent to a concentration camp. Every synagogue, every temple was burned to the ground, and every store, every Jewish business was totally destroyed. It was incredible. In mid-March, we were called to the American consulate, and as we are sitting in the waiting room, waiting to get in and get our visas, the radio announced that Hitler had just invaded Czechoslovakia. And everybody knew immediately that war was imminent. When we got in to see the vice consul, one of the first things he said is that he suggested that we book passage on an American ship, and he explained that while we are at sea and war breaks out, all ships get returned to their country of origin. And should we be on a German ship, we would just be returned to Germany. And then he issued the visa. Now, I don't know what I expected, but I expected some official-looking big document. All the visa was a little 2x2 stamp in our passports. Looked at that and said, how can a little bit of ink and a little bit of paper save your life? But it did. We closed the door to our apartment as though we were coming back, and we went to the train station and took the train to France, to Le Havre. Our ship, the President Harding, was anchored at the coast of Normandy, the very place where just 5 years later our troops landed, Omaha Beach, to liberate Europe. Getting onto this ship was quite an experience. We had never had any contact with any Americans. They were so very nice. It was awesome. They took our suitcase. They showed us to our cabin. They showed us where the dining room was, and there was no sign, Jews not wanted. And we weren't used to that. We were being treated like human beings. And it was a very strange sensation, because for many years we were not treated like human beings. We were on the ship for 12 days. It was an old ship. We saw the Queen Mary coming and going, and on Saturday, May the 6th, we sailed into New York Harbor, and there was the magnificent skyline of New York, and there was Lady Liberty, and we were all hugging and crying and laughing. It happens every time to me when I talk about this Statue of Liberty. And we were free. We each had a suitcase with clothing, and between the four of us, we had $2.50. The Nazis kept everything else that we had. But we really didn't care. We were young, and we were looking forward to a new life in America. And in closing, I want to share with you that this country has never disappointed me. I've had a good life here. We all had a very good life here. We truly lived the American dream. Thank you.